right, we're back with one more down. Today we have Andre Jackson Sr., tight end, outside linebacker, receiver. Some might call him boundary corner in certain sets. But myself and Andre, we go back to the early elementary school days, and we're connected through family, friends, and neighborhoods and activities. So we have a relationship that spans over 45 years at this point. It's good to have you on. I got a chance to experience what you do and how you progressed into your manhood and your family life that year I spent living down in Charlotte. Appreciated having you in that area as somebody that I could fall back on when needed. And, just like that neighborhood environment that we were raised in, those bonds and those friendships from that era, they just stand the test of time. So, I'm glad that you could join me and give us some insight and backstory into your career and what you're into these days. Welcome to One More Down.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me. When you mentioned it, it was a no-brainer. I was excited to be a part of it. I'm super proud of what you're doing. This is awesome.
If we were off camera, we'd certainly be joking whether, you deserve to be a participant or not. But your resume says you definitely deserve to be a participant. And then all those touchdowns that you scored on Fosterville Playground, I guess you're worthy of a slot. To get started, I'd like you to kind of give us some background of your beginnings and your origins, and just how you end up landing on the South Side of Youngstown, Ohio.
Yeah, well, it goes back a bit. So I was born on the South Side, and my mom remarried, and we actually moved to Germany. So we were in Germany from 3 to about 6. And she moved back. We lived down the hill, kind of where I had grown up for the rest of my time in Youngstown. My mother and grandmother both lived down the hill, but I had an aunt. I can probably say this now because, it's time has passed and school is closed. My aunt lived up the hill on Bonnie Bray, right by Hydora Park. So we used her address so I can go to Cleveland School. At the time, I don't know, Grant had closed. I think, there was an influx of students at Hillman. And for whatever reason, my mom just felt the need to send me up there. Plus, my brother went there when he first got back. And both of my cousins, my older cousin was there. So it just kind of was a good fit to have family there to kind of help with the process. My aunt and uncle were bringing me home from school. My mom would pick me up after work. So it just kind of worked. So I kind of ended up at Cleveland School, and kind of South Side is where I dwelled for the majority of my life.
Now, that when you were saying that, there's just jogged so many memories, because I remember days where you footed it all the way down Glenwood from up by the Fosterville area all the way essentially to the bottom of Glenwood. Yep. And when you think about that, we 6, 7 years old in that day and age, it was no thing for a young kid like that to be just traversing different neighborhoods, going from different sides of town, being gone all day, and your parents not even worried about where you at, because we had some survival skills back then.
We did. We did. We kind of knew. And, everybody looked out. You talk about the village. I think the village was pretty much, it spanned for miles for the most part. Now, I was in trouble when I walked home, but it was a sacrifice. I said, I'm going to go to Candyland and Mr. Paul's Bakery, and I'm not going to go over my aunt and uncle's house. So I basically would miss my ride. So I missed my ride. I didn't want to get a whooping from them. And then when my mom got out of work, get a whooping for her. So I just walked home. I said, what, I'm going to go to Mr. Paul's. I'm going to get me a glazed donut and a Pac-Man cookie. And I'm going to just walk down the high street.
Now, when you think back to those early days, now, if we're talking about from High Street all the way up to Princeton Avenue, we're talking about a good 4-mile walk at minimum.
Yeah, it was, and you know what? It's funny, it felt like it could have been that, but I don't really think it was that far. I think it was probably 1.5 miles. but it felt
No.
like I was walking for 2 weeks, but I was probably walking for 45 minutes if I'm walking straight without no play. Now, if I'm playing, everybody who lived down to about, I guess where the cutoff might have been Warren. So as I'm walking, I'm playing, and as people just kind of fall off as they head down their street, and then before you know it, I'm at Woodland, and it's just me. So I get going. So yeah, I mean, I guess it probably is about maybe 2.5, 3. I'm gonna have to map it out now. Now that we have the technology.
Yeah, you talk about that crowd of kids that's going their different ways as their homes and their streets come up. But if you think back to the times we was at Cleveland School and at Princeton, if it was a fight, the whole school is rolling right to your doorstep
Yeah, we
from
mob
the
all the way down that
bell
street.
ringing.
Whatever street it was, the whole crowd would just mob right down the street. Oh yeah, it was. Those were the time, man. It was a good time. It was a wild time, but it was a good time. I think you said it best. We kind of knew how to navigate, in edgier settings, just kind of by nature.
Absolutely, because I guess I didn't consider it, and I didn't really think about it as a child, but as I've grown into adulthood, and I appreciate and understand better now just how deep our parents' relationships went throughout the city, because they went to school with other adults and individuals, teachers, administrators, police officers, city councilmen. So all across that whole city, if your parent had a good reputation, somebody knew who you were, even if they never spoke to you, and they
Yeah,
always had their eye on you. So I guess, that's what made it safe for our parents to, leave us to our own devices and let us figure our way out and just mature the same way that they had done as
yeah,
kids growing up.
yeah, yeah.
Now,
The village spawned from sides of town, miles and miles, pretty much. Especially, when you talk about churches. I went to church on the east side, so all the people involved, and what I mean. It was just the village was huge, which made it safe. Believe it or not, regardless of what people say, it was actually a pretty safe environment at the time.
right, because I didn't let my kids walk 2 blocks, because it's like I don't know who lived there. I don't know these people around the corner. And if my mom knew some of the places I was in Mill Creek Park,
Yeah,
I could have easily been a statistic messing around down there the way that I did.
yeah, oh yeah.
Now, what is your first entryway into athletics? What's that first sport that you get involved with as a youth?
So it's funny. I mean, it was when we first got back from Germany, I was probably kindergarten. So about that time, I started taking swim lessons. My mom was going to the YWCA, so I can get swimming lessons for free. So she would go down on Saturday and do whatever women do at the YWCA, and I would go take swimming lessons. So it was kind of swimming, and then eventually it just evolved into spending a lot of time at my grandmother's house, and Clifton Floyd. He lived 2 houses up, and then there was apartments on the other side, and it was just football. So it was kind of a rough and tumble, fighting, biting, kicking type of environment as a 5, 6, 7, 8, and around 8, maybe 7 or 8, my aunt, her boyfriend was over at the house. They were sitting on the porch, and we were just out running around playing football. And he said he needed to play football, and I was kind of like, I'm playing football. You know what I mean? At that point, I didn't understand anything about organized sports. Football, what we were doing was football. This was NFL to us at 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. So he had said you need to play football. So that kind of became the sport. I spent some time with my dad one day, and he dropped me off to Coach McGee. I was 8. He bought me a new pair of Astro cleats. They were the knockoff kangaroos with the little change pouch in the front. He bought me a pair of Astro cleats, and he dropped me off to Coach McGee's, and that's kind of what it was. And that was more of at the time, it was more of a nurturing family environment. So it was a little bit more than just playing a sport, because I really hadn't bought in yet. I was a D lineman. I was cool. I was strong and aggressive, but you had the new kids on the D line. So I was a D lineman, but it was more about being around men, having some father figures, and it just spawned into a competitive, kind of competitive instincts kind of kicked in, and I started to really develop a love for the sport. But it was literally just playing in the yard, and because if that conversation would have never came up, I probably would have never said. Eventually, I'd have played, but I probably would have never said at that time, "Hey, Dad, I want to play football. Drop me off at the football field." So.
Now, with you living internationally so early on, I guess I've never even asked you about that experience. I'm assuming that you were on base when you were in Germany.
We actually lived off base, but the majority of the residents in our community were American military people, give or take a family or two. And it was a good experience. I mean, it was early, so it was preschool. I guess 2 years of preschool, but it was actually equivalent to our kindergarten when I came back. Super clean. Things I can remember, super clean. My babysitter was cute, and the candy was good. Like it was, it wasn't a whole lot, because it was almost like being in the States, because everybody in our community was American. We're American military families, so you spend some time with them. There was a house a couple doors down that was a German family, and I don't know if I can say this or not, but they ran around the sprinklers in the nude. So we just thought it was awesome. That was kind of the only international, experience I would get on a summertime weekly basis. But for the most part, it was pretty similar outside of schooling, of course. It was pretty similar to here. We ran around, we tackled and rolled up and down the hill and kind of did what kids do.
Now, do you have any recall about that transition back and having to reacclimate into being back in Youngstown?
Yeah, and I guess initially it was probably more the school, because I came back. I came back and I was in the first grade. And I remember my grades were good. I always got pretty good grades in elementary school. My grades were good. But they were saying I was just mature. Like I was the last to get in line. I was kind of last to do everything. And then one day, a girl, this is when they kind of like, yeah, we gotta, put him back in kindergarten. A young lady, she erased her eraser all the way down to it was real small, and all the eraser shavings. And she's like, hey, look at this. And I bent down and she blew it in my face. And I was like, damn, they're bullying me. And if I told you the name, you would say, oh yeah, I can see that. And right then it was kind of like, I think I was crying or something. And they were like, yeah, I was immature. There was youngsters put me back in kindergarten. And then it was kind of from there. So that was the biggest acclimation, just kind of, because I guess kind of in Germany, we were all I was probably the bigger of all the kids. So I was kind of the leader of the 4, 5, 6-year-olds, 4 and 5-year-olds, coming here, moving me up a grade. I was a young kid, and it was the class was I think back, it was a pretty aggressive class. It was Miss Bayless, actually. It was Miss Bayless's class. It was a pretty aggressive class. Kids a little bit more mature than I was. So it was that was kind of the biggest acclimation, just kind of starting school and having to go back to kindergarten. So, and I was being bullied,
Well, as you move into that Mount Calvary Sons of Thunder thing, they had that reputation for being a church organization, but the discipline that was part of that program, can you talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely it was, and I come from a pretty stern, household, single mom trying to raise 2 kids. It was always pretty firm. But it was stern. I mean, it was and it was good because I was able to take some of the traits that I kind of developed in that situation along with me, like just kind of about focus and about being attentive to detail. But it was solid. I mean, you couldn't. I mean, if you're playing on the sideline while the big team is playing, you might get a walk in the woods. I mean, if you didn't know a Bible verse, at the end of practice, which I still know every one we went over today, with or without going to church, I still know all the Bible verses that were ingrained in us, which is good. But if you didn't know a Bible verse, you might get a walk to the woods, or you might have to run the hill. I don't know how many times you've been to the South Side pool, but that hill was a nightmare. When they said when they said, "Are we going to run the hill?" Everybody just kind of deflated inside. But it was stern from a disciplinary standpoint, and it in game. I mean, there's a lot of in game discipline as well. Like if you're running 36 blasts as a fullback, if you don't get your head on the right side of that defensive end or outside linebacker and kick, you could get a walk to the woods at halftime. It was stern, it was disciplined, but it was probably a good foundation for me, somebody who was kind of struggling to find their way as a youth. It worked out. It was stern.
Well, but you know, it sounds crazy when we say this now as adults,
Yeah.
and especially as parents, because you know, for the most part, we're not about to trust another individual to have their hooks into our children
Mm-hmm.
in that manner. But it kind of fit the era that we grew up in.
Yeah.
Those things that went on helped you cope, help you deal with the environment that you were immersed in. And especially, you know, it came in handy as we start coming of age and there were more obstacles and traps and pitfalls for us to, you know, choose from. When you say that walk into the woods, now I remember, you know, at halftime, the whole squad would just disappear into the trees. And then, you know, you come back out for the second half and it may be a different type of fire out there on the field.
Yeah. And it was that you went in the woods and you were disciplined sternly. But it wasn't a situation where you would ever go home and say, "Mom, you know, Coach such and such did such and such." You went down and you were disciplined and you kind of took it and you felt like, yeah, I was wrong. Like you never, you know, which now today, you know, kids are coddled, not, you know, no offense to anybody, you know, but kids are coddled to a bit and it's us because we want better than we had. So we have our kids in different situations. So, you know, some of those methods might not be necessary, but, you know, now if you were to yell at a kid firmly, profanity free, but if you just yell at a kid, you know, you might have a call from their parent, you know what I mean? Like even in high school, like, and it's a little bit disheartening and frustrating because, you know, we care now. You go to the next level, they don't care. They're going to talk to you, you know, kind of way. And I wish you would call your mom and have your mom call the coach and say, "Why are you screaming at my kid?" But back in the day, you went down and you looked at, but you trusted those guys because you seen, you know, for the most part, you know, they were strong pillars of our community. And you've seen, you know, you talk about, you know, starting playing when I was 8 on the Pee Wee team, 90-pound team, and you see so many kids who came back year over year over year. And we even had a middle school team at that time with phenomenal football players, but they came back and they were committed. Like everybody was committed to that program. So you kind of knew like, well, you know, this is what makes, maybe at that time you're not thinking this is what makes a man, but this is what makes me into Anthony McGaha. You know, this is what makes me, and you know, some of those guys, you look, because they've been there since they were, you know, the age I was at the time. So you looked up to those guys. They went through the fire or took the walk in the woods on several occasions. So you knew like, all right, this is what it takes. This is what it takes to kind of get to get that competitive edge and get to the next level. As I look back, that's what I'm thinking. At the time, I was like, "This is, man, come on."
Well, yeah, but it's true though, because really, you know, it's a microcosm of what football is at those upper levels. But you know, it's our peer set, it's our peer group that we're competing against, and this reputation and this bragging rights, you know, in school,
Oh
around
yeah.
the neighborhood, and then it's a measuring stick. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
you had some mercenaries that probably played for every team down in Bonnie Rogers and you know, out in Camel,
Our
North
hat.
Side, whatever. But you know, the kids that really were committed to their neighborhood teams, you're right. You know, when you enter the organization, you pretty much finished out and then moved on to that next level, and you kind of knew who was who and what was what
Yeah.
as you progressed up to each level. So you're one of the few that made the cut to stay and play junior high ball at Princeton. Uh, you know, I I wasn't one of those people. I remember, Black Monday. I was late because I had a detention. I didn't make the 5-minute mark to get down and get my gear and get ready. So by the time I got down to Cleveland School and Fosterville Playground, as soon as I stepped out there, I got informed, hey, you got all F's last year. You're not going to be a part of this team. And then, I was, embarrassed, but too hard-headed and stubborn to show that I had disappointed myself,
Right.
because football was what was that thing that kept me motivated at that age. You bring up the living situation, and for myself, it's the same thing. Although, my father was never out of my life, he was out of the household. So, I come from that house of women, and a lot of things that I had to figure out growing up. It was just trial and error, you know, walking into a situation and learning the hard way, and just
Right.
really figuring out. So that football track, that's what really kept me grounded. That's what really kept me moving forward. And having that taken away for that 2-year period, it was big, because I think if I hadn't got back to it in 10th grade, I couldn't tell you how
Right.
my life would have turned out, how my life would have ended up, because it was a fork in the road for me. Um, when you're left back by yourself with everybody else, give us some insight to how that year went, and not only how the year went, but how that developed you and shaped you, and you know molded your view of what football was for you at that time period.
I hated each and every one of y'all. I mean, I was so hot because I played 7th grade. I played for the Sons of Thunder in 7th grade. So that middle school team was solid. I mean, because there were several 7th graders who played on that team. From because I think Denicio, he played on that team. There were several 7th graders on that team who were returning, who were in the same grade I was returning. I'm like, oh, this 8th grade team is we about to be loaded. We about to go destroy. We about to destroy everybody. And then D-Day, so to speak, came, and I'm like, coming back, because I don't know if I was at. I feel like I don't remember the scrimmage. But I remember when I got there, it was just kind of me, and it was me and a couple other guys, and I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be tough." I mean, little did I know how tough it was actually gonna be. I mean, it was, we didn't really have a quarterback, we didn't have a running back. I was kind of both. So, we run quarterback sneak, quarterback keeper. I move the tailback. We run a dive power sweep. We run a center sneak, and it was me. Like, it was, it was a challenge, and one of the first times my mom was ever able to come see me play, the first and only time she was able to come see me play before my sophomore year of high school, we were playing at Hayes, and they ran a toss, and I catch the toss, I bobbled it, and I looked up, and all I saw was black jerseys. And I was like, where's my team? And I ran, and I bounced it to the sideline. I go down. I feel like I could feel every person land on top of me, all 11 of them, like 1, 2, 3, 4. And I was like, man, this is crazy. This is for the birds. But I actually scored, believe it or not. I mean, I had a pretty successful little league career, but I actually scored my first touchdown in middle school. It was on a reverse. It was everything was trickery. Like, we couldn't run anything but trickery. So we ran a reverse. Came around. I hit the seam. This was against Adams or Boardman. Those were the only 2 games we won. And I hit the seam, and I ran, and I split the safeties for about 60 yards. And I danced, and I was so excited. I'm running, I remember. And I held up, how you run, you hold up the number 1. I was like, no. And I was like, 2. And I just put my hand down, like, because at that time we were probably 0-4. So it was a challenge, but it was a welcome challenge. It was the first time, in all honesty, that I knew I could really run the football. Because, for the Suns, I played some fullback, but it was the big lumbering 2, 3, 4 yards. By the time I was running the football, it was probably my second to last year. And I ran the ball a couple times, but it was the first time I ever fumbled. And it was in a playoff game against the Penguins. And I'm running the ball. We down by 4, something close, and I fumbled. Bear hit me, boom, and I fumbled. And then you guys recovered and win the game. So that was kind of, I wouldn't really run the big run. I didn't really run the ball a lot. And because the next year I played quarterback. So it was, some quarterback keepers, but, I was just, kind of lumbering around. I was still a little thick built, But when I get to Princeton, it was like, you're going to figure this thing out. So I was running, literally, if we ran 40 plays, I ran the ball probably 36 of them. And it wasn't like that, oh, we got the sweet, fast kid, we're going to give him the ball every play. It's all we got. So he's going to run the ball every play. And it was a challenge. But at that point, I knew, I could run the football. So when I transitioned to freshman football, when I got a lot of touches, I felt the transition from, I played lineman, fullback, quarterback. So I really felt the transition in middle school. I kind of found my athleticism, and I was able to kind of propel that into some success that next year.
Now, before we kind of move into your high school experience, I was pleasantly surprised to find out just how great of a player your father was in high school. Now, were you aware of that, as you're making your way through football and, finding your sweet spot, or is this something that you learned later that he had a certain reputation as a player?
No, I mean, it's something that this town is, Youngstown is small. I mean, it's smaller now than it was then, but it's small. He had a reputation. And at the same time, my mom is, people kind of know my mom. She's a phenomenal lady. So she's known throughout. And we went to church on the east side. So, and he went to East. So I might hear it every Sunday, like, "Ooh, your dad." And from the conversations I've had with folks, he was it. Like he was legit. So I heard it pretty much throughout my life. And, kind of going back a bit, my dad is who dropped me off at football practice, my first football practice. And Coach Pegues is a distant relative of us, Paul Pegues. So dropped me off, and it's like, "Oh, you Alpha son, you got to be sweet." I was a center. I wore 50. Hopefully I get there, but I'm not. The next year I wore 73. I was a tackle. You know what I'm saying? But I had success on D the whole time. But so I heard it quite often. I heard it from my first day going to football practice, probably all the way through, the day I graduated in 1993, how phenomenal of a football player he was.
Well, I'm gonna just spotlight him just for a second because, people of our generation, they probably have no idea, and just for perspective, we're talking about your dad is a high schooler in the late 50s, graduating 1960. So he's all city as a junior, and we're talking about a time period where there were a lot of great players that were packed into the city of Youngstown, all competing in that same league. And for the 1950s, he's dominating. There's an article about him. They play Wilson, and it's like week 1 or week 2 of the season. They beat Wilson 48-0, and he has 6 touchdowns for like 300 and something yards. And you just never hear that from that time period. And then he goes the next week and puts up another 3 touchdowns. So he's got like 9 touchdowns in 2 games, makes all city, is poised to have a big breakout year and then really be that feature guy his senior year. But part of his senior year gets interrupted because he misses about 3 to 4 games of that season with an injury, and it allows his backfield mate Willie Rogers to emerge.
Willie Rogers is also his best friend later in life.
But I mean, just and obviously not having film, and with us having finished our careers and know what high level football looks like. When you read the articles and you read the exploits and you see what he's doing, what his impact is and his effect is on the game, you don't have to see film to know that he was a tremendous player,
All right.
that he was a cut above, those he was competing against. Now, for yourself, you end up becoming a well talked about, well respected player in your own right based on your own efforts. Is there anything that you credit to, your dad that you use as a football player, or do you just credit your development to hard work and taking advantage of the systems that you were brought up in?
Probably a little bit of both. I mean, if not necessarily for the physical traits, because we're built similar. Um, Lower body, thick, muscular lower body. I think he probably had an opportunity to be in athletic positions earlier than I was, because I think he developed his speed probably a lot sooner. I was a little bit later in life. You realize that I could actually run. But I think probably more than anything, to kind of take it off the jovial topic, but it was I didn't really spend much time with him day to day, and he really wasn't in my life, like most boys would want their father to be. And I think that kind of fueled me, what I'm saying? Because I was here and I heard how phenomenal he was. And he was. I mean, from the first day I was dropped off of football practice, literally to the day my graduation, every day it was heard. And so I just always felt like I'm gonna be all right too. Like, and I want to show everybody, not necessarily show him, but I want people to, because there were expectations on me. Like when my sophomore year, I didn't play football. I would probably get to that, but Butchie came and said, "Yo, your dad was phenomenal. You could be one of the first football players, one of the few football players to start as a sophomore, et cetera, et cetera." But in those things, I'm like, it's probably more the fuel of making everyone proud and just kind of making people talk about me when we talk about football. That was kind of, more than anything. And, so I put my head to the ground and I decided to work and wanted to win. I kind of always wanted to win. I just felt like with this situation, maybe it was a, father's home situation. I just felt like throughout life, I took so many losses. So my drive was to win and was to show people that, there's another Jackson that's going to have success, on this football field.
I can relate to that because, and for me, it's slightly different because, my father was baseball and basketball, and I didn't really have an interest in those sports, and then because of the city that we're raised in, everything is competitive, so you don't get that understanding that this is just in your blood. You know what I mean? You just feel
Right.
like, oh, I'm this way because this is what me and my friends do. But then when that coordination starts to kick in and you start to get an understanding of the game a little bit better mentally, and then you settle into what your skill set is, whatever that is, based on the individual, you start realizing like, oh, this is really a gift. It's not
Right.
something that somebody has taught me. It's not something that you've done a million drills to do. There's certain things about you as a person and an individual, and I'm saying this, as a a second set of eyes looking at you from the outside in, and some of the things that I could see you do for your size, for the different sports that you play. Because when I think back, as tremendous as a football player that you were, basketball is always what I saw you doing. It was like
Right.
that. It seemed like that was your first love, but football was what your DNA and your body type demanded.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I mean, I always, because football is always, basketball is always fun. Practice is fun, but it's fun. And that's kind of what I kind of did throughout life, like conditioning to stay in shape, working out. It was like, I'm just going to go hoop all day instead of, running my, even in college, like, we got this, when you come back, you got this running test. All right, cool. I'm just going to hoop 10 games a day. And then I'll be prepared for the running test when I get back to school. Like, it's something that I've kind of always kind of took a liking to. I didn't, my game, I didn't really get into basketball until probably sixth grade when we had the sixth grade game at Cleveland School. That was kind of the first time I was like, that was my first basketball practice. And you know what I'm saying? So I didn't play in seventh grade. I didn't even go out. And then eighth grade was the first time I kind of was really on the basketball team. And I kind of started. So that, like that eighth grade, that summer, I just worked. I worked on my, really worked on my game more than anything. I worked on my left hand. So I would be at Sylvester's house before his parents got off work, and we'd be in his backyard. We'd be playing basketball, and you hear the garage door open, or the parent, I run out and run back around to Bonnie Bray. So basketball was something that I've always kind of loved, just because it gave me an opportunity to compete. On a daily basis. You can't play the same type of football, day in, day out, but it gave me an opportunity to compete. And also I looked at it as a way to kind of condition, kind of away from the football field.
Now, because of our proximity and then our familiarity with each other, I'm one of those people that I don't really forget details and events. And I'm not bringing this particular thing up to paint you in a certain way or anything, but I have to bring it up because it represents who you are at your core. So and I'm gonna say this, it's not nothing bad, but it's just something that I saw and witnessed that told me a lot about who you were as a person. So, when we talk about, late 70s Youngstown, early 80s Youngstown, we're talking about a lot of fighting, a lot of bickering, a lot of arguing. Now we have that experience that only those that may have gone through Hellman, only those that may have gone through Hayes really understand, because you and we went to Princeton for 7th and 8th grade. And that, I would characterize you, I would characterize myself and a lot of our other peers as, young men that come from good homes with solid parenting and morals and values that are in place within those homes. But I don't know if our parents were aware of how treacherous and how dog eat dog it was going to Princeton for 2 straight years.
Man.
And I say that to bring up, the fight that you had when they tried to take you down and jump you on the way into school in the morning, and you didn't have backup, you didn't have help. It wasn't provoked, it wasn't warranted, it wasn't necessary, but you stood on your 10 toes and you banged it out with 2 brothers. I won't say their names. And then, somebody else trying to sneak in and just be a part of the fray. And I don't know if you won or lost, but I know you went home standing on your own too. I know that was probably one of the first days, because, up to that point, given some of the guys that we were around, some of the guys that we grew up with, that wasn't really your lane to be somebody who was in the middle of conflict. But you were never somebody that was afraid of a challenge. You was never someone that would back down if somebody crossed the line with you. And that day was a demonstration of what you had inside of you, for 3-4 people to try to take advantage of you without you knowing why, without you having a forewarning. And in that moment, for you to stand in there and go toe to toe, handle what you had to handle, and then move on and still come back to, being a guy who's about his academics, being a guy who's taking care of the business of his athletics, and not letting, the outcome of that turn you into a person that, becomes an aggressor, becomes someone who's going to take advantage of people for no reason. So, what is that part of your spirit that, taught you to be that way as an individual, to hold your own, to stand on your square, and not let anybody move you off of it?
Yeah, and I think it's probably a couple things. Principle. I've kind of always been kind of stood on principle. I think it's that incident. Um, it showed me a lot about community, because after that issue, so that day it really wasn't done. I mean, it ended up blowing up into a whole thing, but get home, get back down the hill, and people who I bumped into, play a little bit of football with, neighborhoods, they rallied behind me. Like, yo, we down the hill. So it was probably 7 to 10 of us the next day. That day before, we're walking around making a plan. It was 7 to 10 of us the next day that come up to the school, walk to school. And I was, and from there, I formed different bonds with all those guys, but it ended up going into a long thing. We ended up having to go down to juvenile court or whatever. But, all that to say, like, that's where, like, because I lived down the hill, but my day to day up until middle school was Cleveland school. I come home, I go to church on the east side. All I really did was slept down the hill. You had a little bit of football here and there. I really wasn't going to the cage that much yet. You know what I mean? But it really gave me, could you pull that close, please? It really gave me a sense of our community. And, you talk about down the hill and people show pride in being from down the hill. It really allowed me to take pride in where I was from, the people I grew up with. And that's what kind of it was about. We were, you think back, I felt like we were looked at just kind of as a subset of a population on the South Side. We were separate from everybody else. Once you crossed over Warren or what, like, we were down the hill, but we were like the bottom. As you mentioned earlier, we were literally the second to last street on Glenwood. We're outside of Orange, but so we were the third to last street on Glenwood. I can walk to Mahoning in, 5 minutes. So we were the bottom, and we kind of felt like we weren't respected the same as, even when you say down the hill, you talk about the Falls and some of those streets, we were like the bottom. So it kind of taught it at that point. It was kind of like, we are who we are. Be proud of where you're from. Be proud of your friends. Be proud of your community, and stand on principle. So at that moment, it was just kind of about principle. And in that situation, it was kind of about principle. And we had an altercation or two since then. And after that, I was kind of able to walk the halls of school. That was 7th grade. So once that issue was over, and I feel like I was like February, I was able to walk the halls, because I was, I'm big on respect and principle. And once that issue ended, I mean, everybody knew where everybody stood. You knew whatever the situation was, I was going to be here, standing 10 toes down. And I was able to walk the halls after that, just kind of, carefree, knowing that I had gained, respect of where I'm from, and then everybody else who I deal with in the day-to-day. So
now, for me, I know that experience going through Princeton, it opened my eyes to what was next for me. So, your older brother Alfred and my sisters, they all was buddies going through Wilson. And, that was where my eyes were kind of focused at, because, that's what was in front of me. That was the example that was laid before me. I met Coach Kopp. I was a big Kevin Harris fan. I liked what they were doing over there at that time. It seemed like a good place to be, and it was different than that Princeton environment. But at the last moment, I chose Cheney because, my best friend was over there.
mm-hmm.
What made you decide to veer off of the Wilson pathway or the South pathway and ultimately land at Mooney?
So coming out of Princeton, I had a quick conversation, I'm going to South, because by this time, by 8th grade, JJ and Foof, they're going to South. Clifton, they're going to South. So 8th grade, we're getting out of Princeton because we get out before them, and we're walking down the South before school is even out. You know what I mean? Like, we're getting down there. So, because I looked up to, by this time, 8th grade, I'm at the cage. So I looked up to the cool boys, Scotty Washington, and some of those guys were like my role model. So I'm getting out of school to walk down just to see what, kind of see what those guys are going to do. And we walking down to hang out with some other guys that I ended up becoming really, really close to through, Clifton. I ended up considering a lot of those guys in his grade some of my closest friends. So I was like, yeah, well, I'm going to go to South. No, you're not. We're not even going to entertain that conversation. So Cheney was the school. It was Cheney, but once I found that I couldn't play my freshman year, I was looking at other options. And Dwayne Thomas, he said, man, I'm going to Ursuline. All right, Dwayne, I'm going to figure out this, it's a town that you got to pay money, but we figure it out. We filled out, my mom filled out the financial aid. We went to the open house, and last minute, he was like, oh, no, I'm going to Mooney. I was like, all right, then mine's Mooney. And I think it might have been a couple dollars cheaper per month. We were able to secure financial aid or whatever, and Mooney was, that's kind of what it was. I didn't know, I was, like I said, not necessarily having, a male figure in the home, because by this time my brother's gone. He's in the military. I kind of was raised by some of the guys from down the hill, like Joe Poole was kind of like my uncle, but big brother at the same time, and I didn't really know no better. I didn't really know what options were out in front of me. So it was a blessing that Dwayne was like, yo, let's go here. You know what I'm saying? Because he was in Princeton. He went to Princeton 7th and 8th grade. So it was a blessing that he kind of steered me to where I was going to go. If he'd went to Ursuline, I'd have been in Ursuline. But my plan was Cheney. But I couldn't forego playing football because by that time I felt like I was finding my way. And I had to get some redemption from that 8th grade year at Princeton. The way you guys left me.
So you play freshman ball, you miss your sophomore year at Mooney. From what I hear from another guy, I think he wore 78 over there. His version is that you were under the spell of Roy Nard for that year. and had hoop dreams and swishing nets in your eyes, but you ultimately returned back for your junior year. So when you compare your experience in that discipline organization with Mount Calvary, you go through a trying time through Princeton of not having enough around you, and then you finding your way back to the gridiron. What is your thought process going into that junior year? What are you hoping to achieve, and then what ultimately happens for you as you make your way back to the football field and that varsity level?
Yeah, I mean, and Coach Nard got me, and I had a successful sophomore season, in basketball, but I didn't I didn't want to do no scout team stuff, and I was like, you know what, I can be all right in this basketball thing. Coach Nard, he sold me, but coming into literally, I wasn't playing football again. I wasn't playing for my junior year. I was sitting on the ledge when you walk down the locker room, waiting for them to open the gym to go to open gym for basketball. And this moment probably saved my life. Dev Culliver, he was coaching that year. He had graduated and did the football thing. He came back and he was coaching that year at Mooney. And he said, hey man, why aren't you dressed? I was like, man, I don't play football. I'm hooping. I'm waiting for him to open the gym. And he said some choice words. He was like, the XYZ. He's like, man, if you don't get on there and get dressed, you playing football. I was like, no, man, I'm a hooper. He walked through. He's like, how many 5'11" hoopers? He walked through. He's like, get your expletives down there and get dressed for football. And so I say that was the moment. And I tell him all the time, like, he saved my life because I wasn't going anywhere for basketball. If anything, I'd have graduated. I'd have went to the Navy. That's probably my plan. Or I'd have been somewhere hanging around the streets in Youngstown. But so at that moment, I was like, all right, let me go ahead and I guess I get dressed since he's talking to me like that. Because once again, I didn't have really any male guidance in the home. So it was conversations that I would have from, people, and, guys in the neighborhood, I kind of cling to male figures who seem to perceive as strong male figures, and Dev was one of those guys. You know, I told him no twice. That third time, he was like, "Man, if you don't get out there and get dressed for football," it was kind of like, oh, "Okay." You know, I was getting male direction, and he gave me direction that would ultimately, you know, save my life. But so going out, you know, I'm thinking, you know, my freshman year had passed, and I was, you know, I was a legit wide receiver because we went spread, two wides, and I played safety. So I'm thinking, all right, I'm about to come out here and get all this back, get this wide receiver thing in safety. So, but in hindsight, one of my biggest regrets in life, and I don't have many, was not playing my sophomore year. When I think back, and humbly speaking, I think if I'd have played, that team wins state. We lose to Revere. They ran an option. They ran an option, and you know, no offense to whoever the guys, the DBs were, but they ran the option, and that quarterback, they called him Sweet Sheet. He would get in that alley, and nobody was coming down the alley. Nobody can get down the alley and tackle him, and he probably ran for 250 yards. Our safety wasn't getting down the box in time to play in space. And you know, looking back, some of my biggest assets were physicality, downhill, tackling in space. I feel like if I'd have played out, he got me state championship, which, you know, so that's probably one of my only regrets. But when I came out, you know, and there was somebody who I considered a friend who was playing in my position on both sides of the ball. But, you know, in the back of my mind, I said, you know, I love him, but I got to get that. I mean, because I didn't come back out, which when I passed on my sophomore season because I didn't want to do scout team stuff. And I didn't want to, you know, because, you know, no sophomores never play. You know, although Butchie was telling me, you know, hey, you know, you might be one of the first few sophomores to play. You know, I didn't believe it. I'm like, man, they got this thing called meatball. I'm not doing that. You know what I mean? I'm not doing it 2 days and not going to play. So, you know, coming out, you know, I felt like the two positions, you know, once they told me I was going to be that wide receiver close to the tackle, I was like, man, come on. Like, I was a wide out. I was split out every snap. All I do is tap my hand, and Coach Conopy was throwing me the ball. Like, and now you just want me to block, like, for 99.9% of the plays. But it was more than that. I wanted to win, and I wanted to compete. So the first scrimmage we had against South, they put me in the second team at, you know, the tight end position. I catch a 73-yard touchdown. So I'm like, all right, you know, that's probably sewn up. And defense, I really wasn't getting any run. Like, you know, you did the 10 plays. So we were probably on defense, play 7, no reps. And then Lamar Gilbert, Tweety Bird, he comes down and he cracks the outside backer. I'm talking about, you know, I mean, you know, Lamar was he was a physical football player. He came down and cracked that outside linebacker, and he didn't get up. And I was like, dang, because I was a friend, you know. I was like, dang, all right, my turn, and that was it. So it was.
Yeah, when you bring up Lamar and Chris, those are Sons of Thunder alumni, and you know, I grew up competing against them in Little League, and then obviously we banged heads against South every year. But those were two tremendous football players, and it's unfortunate because, you know, we bring up the fact of how many of us went on to find our own individual successes and our own landing pads where we went to school. But when you really think about what should have been and what could have been if we were at South where we were all supposed to go, you know, with the right coaching, with the right guidance, you know, you're talking about a powerhouse school that probably would still be open today had they not lost all of that talent, you know, going around it. You know, you end up having, you know, a tremendous career at Mooney. You make all SVC, you make first team all state as a outside linebacker. When you think about your time as a player there, you know, and I'd like to hit that in 2 parts. So, you know, you all obviously play a meat grinder of a schedule every year because at that time, I think you guys were in Division III
Yeah.
by that time. But, you're talking about a SVC that's got Fitch in it, eventually Warren Harding, Boardman. These are D1 schools that are, scraping and scrapping to make sure that they get into the Division I playoffs. And then you have your annual battle with Ursuline, and that's, records aside, you just know that's going to be a dogfight year in and year out. And then out of conference, you all, if it's not at least two teams, you always gonna have one team that's, on paper, you guys probably shouldn't be playing, but then you go out there and somehow, some way, it's you all coming back to ring the victory bell. What are your best out of conference memories? What schools did you enjoy playing against over those 2 years?
For me, it was all like, so those 2 years I was fortunate. And I guess they played them every year after, give or take. It was the McKinleys. I mean, because we were supposed to lose by 21 points the first year. We go up to Fawcett, which was a terrible field, by the way. It was horrible. It was raining. We go up to Fawcett and we beat them 38-16 or something up in Fawcett. Come back the next year, we got them in Youngstown, and they had all these. Well, the next year, the running back was an All-American, but they had 4 All-State guys. One went to All-State. The number 9, I can't think of his name off. And they had a lineman to go to All-State. We were supposed to lose by 30, and we go down 8-0 first drive. I'm like, damn, we might get blew. But we ended up winning like 34-8. And that was probably one of the better football games I played. I probably had over 120 yards receiving. I had 2 sacks, a forced fumble, 9 tackles. But those moments were big. I mean, because the first year we played them early, and I had like 90 yards receiving from the tight end spot as an 11th grader, really not getting many touches throughout the year. I mean, our backfield was phenomenal that year. So really not getting many touches. They threw a boot, and I caught a 60-something yarder and caught a couple, little catches here and there. So McKinley is always, I think, as a team, we were a team of overachievers. I think for the most part, we stood up against our opponents where we weren't expected to. So both years, McKinley was probably, some of our best Friday nights. For me, Fitch was, I liked playing Fitch because they were always a big, strong team, a Division I team. We were the underdog. I'm undefeated against Fitch, 11th grade and 12th grade. 11th grade, junior and senior year. So those two, the Boardman was a good rivalry, but that Kent McKinley and that Fitch, going into those games, we were always the underdog. And it felt good to come out on top. Both of those games.
Now you guys shared Steel Valley in '92, I believe. Did you all share 92 or 91?
We shared with Ursuline with 92.
And then that
we had a lot of injuries. We should have beat them by like 4 touchdowns, but
I know, that's the rival, and it's because of the profiles of the schools. For us, I guess they always made Fitch and Cheney the rival because it's the opening game. But I always enjoyed that game. I liked the atmosphere, but I was always more excited to come back and play in conference in the city, to go against the guys that I grew up, playing against in Little League, on the playgrounds, what have you. With the Mooney and Ursuline rivalry, you guys end up watching that game year to year as you're progressing through the school, and you realize all the tradition and the buildup that's surrounding that game every year. who were some of those guys that you respected on that other side of the ball for them?
The Stargell brothers, they were good football players. Timmy Terrell was their quarterback, right? He was solid. Competing against him in basketball too. I'm kind of a jerk because I don't really give a lot of respect to the opponent.
Right.
No offense to anybody, I apologize. And two, I didn't come from the feeder schools. Right. So just coming into Mooney is kind of, to me, I mean, I guess it's a rivalry because we had the pep rally and everybody was excited. It was Erskine week. It was a rivalry to me by affiliation, but I mean, this is going to sound crazy. I mean, I was excited to play them and it was an intense rivalry, but I was a little bit more amped up to play Rand my senior year. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because all those guys I've been playing against, some of those guys that played for the Boys Club, played for the Northside Knight, I've been competing against them year in, year out. I didn't even know any of the guys from Erskine really. The Stargell brothers, but the Stargell brothers were solid. And Timmy Terrell was a pretty good quarterback. So I remember those guys. But I mean, South Side down the hill guy, man. My Robert. I wanted to play Cheney.
As we wrapped up our high school careers, we got that chance to play in the MVCA All-Star game, and that was a really great experience. I remember the practices that whole week. It was just you're getting the bang heads with all these guys that are supposed to be all this, all that from all over the county, and you're testing yourself because you're like, okay, this is a league we've never played before, but I know this back, I know this receiver, I know this guy. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm gonna just flat out say it, because that week of practice, that allowed you to see the differences between the other regions that surround Youngstown and that is Youngstown.
Right.
Because as great a player as all of these guys were, and they deserve to be there, but I saw who was who in practice that week. So, and Dwayne should have been over there on the other side of the ball as a back, but we chose our positions. We just decided to be defensive backs for this particular game. Charles Purdue, and competing against him for those 3 years at Cheney, I knew what he was about. He's speed. If you give him a seam, he's gonna take it to the house. But Charles Purdue would save himself for when the lights come on. If you remember that week of practice, he wasn't trying to take contact. He wasn't trying to get a whole lot of reps.
I was running the ball.
Yes. We got in the game though, and he was like, he put his cape on and turned out. But John Wolf came to play that whole week of practice.
He did. And he was amped up every day. He did. He so did.
He was a man. So, it was just interesting because it's almost like that preview and that little bit of taste of what you have to do when you go to college, because now it's not just, who's reliable, who's coming to practice all the time, who's a legacy guy. When you get into that upper level environment and then it becomes business, it's not about affiliation. It's not about where you're from. It's not about what you did. It's about, hey, what are you doing? What do you know? Are you prepared? So switching into that topic, what was your recruiting process like as you're leaving from Mooney, and you end up at Ohio University, but what else is on the table for you prior to making that decision?
So it was pretty much all the MAC schools, Kansas State, Iowa, and strangely enough, Southern. That was, I had a visit scheduled to Southern. I don't know. I'm thinking back, and it's funny. I have a clipping, and they say, I had 18 Division I offers. It's so long, like I don't know exactly who or what counted in the 18, or was it FBS and FCS, or I'm sorry, 1AA and one single A. It was all the MAC schools, Kansas State, and it's strange because I was excited about Dwayne and Mark. I thought we were going to go to Miami and visit Miami together that second or third week. They went to Toledo week 1. I went to OU, or maybe they went to but I thought we were going to meet up on an opportunity, and we were going to get to talk, like, where you going, what you thinking about. But I think they committed the first week. I talked to Delaney. I think they committed the first visit, and I committed the first visit. It was, and it really, at that situation, it was, once again, not knowing the process, and Coach Haywood, who was a recruiter for OU for our area, he did a phenomenal job selling my mom. I mean, and this is going to sound crazy. I mean, but, like I said, just not having a male to guide me through a lot of these life choices, I didn't really care where I went. Like, I wasn't going to Manhattan, Kansas, even though my two predecessors in the same positions I played, like Chuck was in that role, both the same role I was in on both sides of the ball right before me, and Jamie was on both sides of the ball in the same role as Chuck right before him. It almost was kind of like it should happen. They both went. I wasn't going that far out. And he did Coach Hayward did a good job of selling my mom, and she felt like, based on the conversations, that they were going to graduate me. They were going to stay on me. They were going to discipline me. They were really going to take care of me through that process. And, I was late to the coaches meeting that next morning, like an hour and a half late. And she was furious, but she still, based on the conversation, she thought that was the best place for me to go. So she didn't, coerce me to commit, but she talked about it. She felt like that was the best place for me. And I was like, all right. She loved it. I didn't, I wish I would have been a little bit more engaged in the process, and I would have knew a little bit more, and I would have took all 5 of my visits. So I took the Ohio visit, and I took the Kent visit because Kent was fun. And, that was my first visit and my 5th visit, but they still, they knew I probably wasn't going to come, but they were like, yeah, come on. So we went up and had a good time. We got so many people from Kent. People who just got there, and since probably 10th, 11th grade, me, Chris, Clifton, we were going to Kent every weekend. Like, we went there. So it was almost kind of like, yeah, go get a free party weekend. So it was that. I mean, like I said, if my mom would have said, no, you should go to Kent, I probably would have went to Kent, just because, at the end of the day, I feel like everything, one of my biggest goals, and I said this in the Boys and Girls Club speech, was I wanted to make her proud more than anything, more than money, more than, I just wanted her to be proud. I wanted her to be happy, because it's just been her and us for, her and I for so long. That's what I thought about most of my decision making. So when she thought that was a good fit, all right, it's a good fit,
Now, what is that experience like for you? Because I'm sure I could kind of guess, but as you're leaving away from home, you getting out from under mom's wing. She's gonna be back home in Youngstown doing what she needs to do. You're away figuring out your manhood and your place in Division I football. What are those early experiences like for you in practice in terms of competing, gauging yourself as to where you're going to fit in the system over the next 4 years? Tell me about those early experiences.
I mean, me. I was always a pretty confident competitor. I think that's kind of the way to put it. So I felt like I was about to go down there and start. Somebody's about to lose a job. I haven't lifted weights in my life. I went down there. I mean, if you look, so that's funny because I was looking up an old article, and Butchie, my man, he had me at 6'2", 205 coming out of high school. So, but I hadn't lifted away. I think I might have been maybe 185 pounds, 190 pounds graduating, and that's just because I got a thick lower body from my dad. But I thought I was gonna go down there and take somebody's job, you know. But you know, over the course of the process, they told me I was one of their top 2 recruits, and their plan was to redshirt me. And I was disappointed at first, but then I thought that's just how the process went. You know what I mean? Because that's what, you know. So I went down, I redshirted, and I was traveling. You know, they're taking me to all the games because that's kind of, like I said, you didn't really have to sell me. You sold my mom. So I'm here. But they're like, no, we're going to take you to Virginia. We're going to take you to North Carolina. We're going to take you to, you know, all these games. And they're, you know, getting pounded. So I go to North Carolina, and then I can't remember who we played second. I came and told them, like, I don't want to go. Like, I don't want to travel. Because all my buddies, you know, we came in 11 guys who would have been best friends. They're all redshirted, but they're all staying home. I'm like, I'm going to just hang back with my guys. Like, because my competitiveness, like, even though I wasn't playing, I was part of that unit. I was part of that team. And going somewhere, getting your head kicked in, nothing about it excited me. Like, I don't care how pretty the cheerleaders were in North Carolina and they gave us candy and we ate good. I'm cool because I know at the end of the day, you know, we're probably going to lose. I mean, you know, we're going to lose. And it bothered me to go down and to see people in awe, like, oh man, look at this stadium. Yeah, it's probably it's the biggest stadium I've ever been in, but it's about what's between these lines. Like, you should, you know what I mean? Like, it's all the same to me. And you would go and they would lose, and then, you know, we traveling back, and before we even get to the hotel, I hear laughter on the bus. Like, those are things that just, I don't want to be around that, because it felt like it was a loser's mentality, and I didn't want to become part of that, you know, loser's mentality. Now, a lot of those guys ended up being a part of the transition and, you know, getting, you know, into winning. But at the time, I was like, man, just let me stay home. If I can watch this 42-12 game on TV here locally and get to Court Street before, you know, before it's over. So it was frustrating that first year, but I was able to detach myself once I knew, you know, I was going to be. I was able to kind of detach myself and just kind of roll with the punches. Now the next year was the struggle, but that first year, that transition, I mean, it was. I didn't think we would be. I don't know. That first summer, you know, Mooney two-a-days were tough. I mean, Mooney two-a-days were tough. It was literally two. I mean, I feel like we might have practiced twice for 5 hours apiece, and then I got a breast strip dinner in between, and I was right back. Like, it wasn't, you know, Mooney two-a-days was a challenge, and to go to a Division I college, and you know, when you're done practicing for the day, you're not even fatigued, and now you've incorporated lifting into the process, and you know, I was a little more tired from lifting because I hadn't really lifted in high school than I was from the practices. So it was a bit of an adjustment to understand this is big. This is a big business. So many more factors play into being victorious other than just culture. You know, because I think Mooney, we had a lot of success because of the culture. We had kids who probably wouldn't play football for any high school in the state play at an elite level because they came to play for Mooney and they bought into the culture.
Now, you know, like, I'm listening to that, and part of the reason why I brought it up is because, you know, for those young men that are on this track, for your son, who has aspirations and ability, you know, you don't, unless somebody has schooled you and wrote it out for you, you don't know what to expect when you accept that offer to
Right.
play college football. You know, the time commitment, the attention to detail when you're taking notes of what you're learning.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that once you're named a starter doesn't mean that that's the same thing for the following week. You know, you got to reprove yourself all over again. So I know for myself and Chuck, like where you say you knew you were going to be redshirted, I think the expectation was for us to be redshirted and groomed and grow into our positions. But you know, that competitiveness and that too much testosterone at 18 years old, you know, I put my red shirt to rest when I ran out on a kickoff because the backup didn't know he was supposed to go in. And, I went down. I'm the first guy down the field, first guy in the film, and I get juked out of my body, but I was ready, and I was
Yeah.
paying attention. So there starts my clock, and it's just who we are as people. As we have gone through
Oh
your
man.
story, when the kids that we grew up with, it's football every day. It's
Yeah.
measuring stick every day. It's competitiveness every day, and we don't understand, doing all this work and expecting a loss on the backside of it. It's just not, who we are and what we're about. So I know that first year you guys go 0-11 as you hit the field, and that's a transition from a previous coaching regime to Coach Grove installing a new system on both sides of the ball. And then you're getting your first taste as a red shirt freshman, and as you brought up, the year before, you're seeing this, what's wrong with the culture, what's wrong with the guys that are happy to be there and not there for a purpose or there for a common goal. As you guys start to make that turning of the corner and become go from being the doormat of the MAC to slowly but surely starting to put it together and figure it out, to by the time that you're leaving there, you almost have to point to 97 as that base and foundation of the restart of Ohio
Absolutely.
University football, because in between there, I think there and possibly as far back to Cleveland Bryan as the coach, there's not a whole lot to talk about in terms of success and wins and losses. I may be missing a year, maybe sometime in the 80s, but I don't remember anybody, yelling up from Athens to Youngstown that, hey, it's some football being played down here.
So our we had the first winning record since 1968. They had won a bowl of citrus, some strange bowl back then, but we had, and I mean, we that 8-3, which it should have been different. It was probably the most wins until just recently when they started playing like 12 regular season games in the playoff game. But it was a struggle. I mean, so Grove actually came the year after the 0-11. So we go 0-11 under the same regime, and we were excited, but getting the summer, I knew it was going to be bad. I mean, we had 20 of 22 starters back. We win 4 of the last 5 games. We set. Everybody think we set. We had a lot of people committing to summer for summer school, but when we got to practice, and this kind of goes back to what my ideology of what 2 days should be. We get to practice and we're wrapping up both practices by 11 o'clock. So we'll practice from 7 to 9, maybe not 11. So we'll practice from 7 to 9. We'll take an hour. So both practices done by noon. We practice from 7 to 9. We would get soda and oranges and we'll sit under a tree for like 45 minutes to an hour. And then we'll practice. And we'll practice 10 to 12. And that was 2 days. I mean, we were done with all football activity by, because we would go to meetings and live. We were done with all football activities by 3. So you talk about college kids in a town, into it with just freedom, And at the time it was fun, but when you think back, you're like, that was the reason. I mean, we really weren't prepared to enter into a football season. I mean, and that first game, so I'm playing. I mean, I wasn't playing much. Well, I didn't end up playing much, but the first game, I'm in on packages, and they call the package in, probably Halo, probably 2 or 3 times. I cause a fumble, and I break up a pass. I'm like, okay, cool. You know, I can live with this. I can build from this. We lose 5-0 to a 1AA team. And when the game was over, people were in the locker room joking and kind of smiling. And I went ballistic, yelling, screaming, you know, profanities. Like, what's funny? We just lost to a 1AA team by 5 points. There's no reason to be. And I'm going nuts. And the coaches had to grab me and calm me down. Like, it was. And from then I said, yeah, this season's going, we're going to struggle. Because nobody knows how to win. Nobody cares about winning. The university had lost so long. The university had lost so long that everybody just kind of accepted it. Everybody just kind of accepted that's the way of the world. We're going to come, the band's going to play, and at halftime, the band's going to go home. I mean, we would have, 5,000 people in the stadium until halftime. The band would perform, and then we come out of halftime, and it would be, let me see, so it's 80 kids on the team times two parents. There'd be 160 people in the stands, just parents. It was a struggle. It was a challenge. And then, the strength and conditioning program was, there wasn't real structure to anything that we were doing, from summer school to two-a-days. And we had the talent. I mean, I think our best roster was probably that year. I mean, we had elite wideouts. We had an NFL type corner. We had a really good roster. We just struggled. The guys in the polo shirts just struggled a bit. Phenomenal guys. Rest in peace, the head coach, because he actually helped me a few times, and he's kind of one of the other men I feel like saved my life. But they struggled putting a good product on the field. So we go on 11. So we're 0-8, and they announced that they were going to let him go. So what the next 3 weeks were like. We got a lame duck coach. Then Grove comes in, and you immediately saw the difference. You kind of got back to what I thought football was. Us growing up, football was hard. You worked hard, you sweat, you almost died at practice. It was that. I mean, that was the year. He came to 95, and that was the year it was hot. Like, we were getting up 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, eat breakfast, we watching the news, and the news is Columbus, and you're like, oh, State will be practicing indoors today because 10 people died yesterday from heat exhaustion. And we like, man, we walking down the hill to the stadium, and it was that. I mean, we probably had 20 in that summer. We had 22 scholarship kids not return.
Wow.
I mean, there were people, no BS, there were people leaving in the middle of the night, like sneaking out, like the slave trade. Like, they were literally like, but he came, he was hard, but he was fair. He was hard, though, initially, but it was no screaming, no profanity. He was just hard, but he was fair. And you can feel the difference in culture. We had a new strength and conditioning coach. They held everybody accountable. You talk about a different, prior to that, a Division I program, they would just write the what you're doing today on the board, and then you wouldn't see a guy. You're talking about a Division I program. At the time, we had decent facilities for the mat, but when Grove came, it was about accountability, discipline, doing things the right way. He was, attentive to detail, and then you gradually see year after year. He recruited around that 1993 core, because we graduated. We all came in, all of us pretty much. We came in with 11. Two were one was a red shirt. I mean, one was a prop, and one he wasn't red shirted. So 9 of us were still all on the team that last year. And over the course of the next 2 years, he was able to recruit around that core and fill in where we kind of had gaps. Now, the quarterback and running back combination that he brought in was phenomenal. I mean, 2 of the best backs ever to play in the Mid-American Conference on the same team. So that definitely helped. They played as true freshmen. But the transition was tough. Grove made it. Like, at the end, you believed in him. You believed in everything he said. And he rebuilt that culture. That's 6-16. That was the first time we had won 6 games since 1971. And like I said, the first winning record was the 83 year. That was the first winning record since 1968.
Now, as you get to play throughout the MAC, um, the MAC is full of a lot of Youngstown guys, a lot of Youngstown
Mm-hmm.
greats. What were some of your experiences playing against guys that either were in classes ahead of us growing up, or guys that we uh, came up with or came right behind us?
Man, oh man, what from Camel, the running back,
Dylan McCullough.
Dylan McCullough, he 2 years, so he was there. My freshman, I was redshirted, and then my redshirt freshman, he was there. He was like a ballerina against us, man. Like, we had, and my coach, our defensive coordinator at the time, he hung his hat on the fact that we got the #1 pass defense in the nation, but we were 112 against the run. Dylan McCullough, he did his thing against us. So I remember him, and then another guy specifically, nothing flashy, but I wanted Dwayne Alexander, man. I wanted to kill him. My first year on the field, he probably wouldn't even remember this. He might, but I played outside. They moved when Grove's first year, so not my first year on the field, but Grove's first year, they moved me from kind of strong safety to an outside backer. I'm playing outside backer at 195 pounds. So that tight end stepped down. I played some speed step down with him, and I was like, they're not gonna block me? Oh, I'm about to make this tackle. And I just happened to glance up, and Dwayne Alexander was coming downhill from the fullback spot, 6'4", what was he, 200 and something ugly pounds. And that's the only time in my life that I've ever been ran over. He wasn't even running the football, but I'm talking about he can get his shoulder pads under mine, because by this time I've stepped down. I'm high. I'm looking for the running back. And I don't know what made me take my eyes up. I'm looking for a puller. And so I glanced up, and it's a fullback, and he hit me so hard. And I feel like he stepped on my feet, my shins, my thighs, my stomach, and just the running back come running off, and he bounced outside. We, runs for about 40 yards. And in my mind, I was like, if I see him at home, I'm going to kill him. That's the moment I remember. But he came back and he pulled me up. He helped me up. He gave me the pat. And that might have made it even more, maybe feeling worse. Like, man, he just out, like, good stuff, little dude. But that was, that's the play that I kind of remember. It kind of sticks out. He was a really good football player. But yeah, so, because after that, at Strong Watley, we played against him a couple times. But, after that first year with Grove, Kent was probably one of a week we circled for the most part. Matt Theory, or was it Adam Theory? The real fast.
No, Matt from Champion, Akron.
Matt Champion. He was a good football player. I don't know if he got his just due. I don't know if they had him in the right position in Akron. But he was a good football player from the area that we played against. And then getting an opportunity not really until my last year to play against. Mark was done. For whatever reason, Mark didn't play my redshirt junior year. But getting to play against Delaney was kind of like a dream. He wasn't at his best. He was injured, but he still played. And that was Toledo, the last game of the 96 season. They ended up getting the best of us. It was a nip and tuck back and forth game. We struggled in the pass game a little bit on defense. But I played inside and outside. That was probably the best football game I played in college. Well, I think in Kansas State, but I played inside and outside. The majority of the game I was playing middle linebacker. And there was a play, and they ran the ISO, and he hobbling through there with his brace on. And I was like, this is like it. This is the only opportunity, because we didn't get to play. We played, I think, freshman year, because he played freshman year at Cheney. But this was kind of like the only opportunity, and I tried to murder him. But like a D lineman that kind of grabbed him, so I'm leaving my feet, I'm launching, I just kind of get like a smack on the shoulder pad, That was kind of one of the few carries he had. But, those are opportunities you look forward to, like kind of when we talk about rivalries. Like I never really had big rivalries against other schools. It was more so against, opportunities to play against people I knew or my friends, or because that's kind of how we grew up. Like now these kids don't want to compete against their friends. We wanted to murder our friends and then we want to go have cereal together. Like it wasn't, we're another person. We knew iron sharpened iron, and that's something that we relished. Like we were excited to be able to compete against our peers and people we loved.
And if you were on the favorable side of that, you still get to bring it up every time you get to see that person to this day. I'm gonna go in the grave talking about some of the guys that we dogged out.
Like, I don't really get to bring it up enough, but like we beat Cheney my freshman year. Like the freshman team.
You beat a version of Cheney,
but it was
your freshman year.
I don't bring it up because it was I think the only person on that team was Sylvester and Dwayne.
Just him. He was the only one out of all of us that
he was the only one that went in 8th grade.
Yes, he had transferred over to Vonnie, so he got to
in the 8th grade, right?
Play in the 9th grade. Everybody else we had to sit out.
Where did Mark and Dwayne go in 8th grade?
They went to Adams.
That's right. They went okay. So it was kind of just him. So, but so I don't even really. And JJ was there. I don't know if you remember that short period of time. JJ went to Cheney.
John.
Yeah, John.
Yeah.
He was there, so it was kind of, but it was a little bit of kickoff. I really get an opportunity. So that one moment at Ohio when we, against Toledo. But that's what for me, that's what the rivalries were. I mean, it was getting a chance to compete against people you respected and people you loved. Like you wanted to kill people you loved. So.
You meet a guy down there that ends up becoming one of your true road dogs and somebody that you have built a real strong bond and relationship with in Chris Evans. Can you talk about, what makes the two of you click the way that it does?
I think maybe because, obviously time builds relationships. And I think we had the same goals. First to graduate, to be the first person in the family to graduate. I think that was a goal we both had. And then to win, and going through some of the situations we went through in Athens. I mean, with the losing and, we went through, kind of a lot in a short period of time, with the losing, with his injury, a couple injuries, just kind of being there for him. Me being, a loyal guy, he also has a lot of the same principles. And it was funny because my roommate from two-a-days, you end up bonding with your two-a-days roommate, like, because you guys are, especially that first 2 days, is unfamiliar, but you're getting up early together, you're holding each other accountable. Come on, man, you got to be here. So my roommate in 2 days, we kind of played similar positions. He was a free, strong, and I was a strong. So we were best friends from day one, and we were in the summer program together. But come school year, that ends up becoming his roommate. So it was and they lived right above us. We were same dorm. They were the 4 above us. So just kind of in always. And like I said, that class came in pretty close. The majority of people that committed and came, we all came that same weekend. I know 6 of us all came that same weekend. So I knew him from there. But just the first couple weeks of school, it was every day in his room because my first best friend in college was there. So it was every day in his room, every day in his room. And then we kind of became a pack of 4, my roommate and him, my roommate, me, him and his, him and, my old roommate from the summer. So we kind of became a pack of 4. We had the same schedule. So it was kind of just time and kind of, time and circumstance kind of merged us all together. And then he tore his knee up. And, at that time, a lot of times that's kind of when you left alone, like, because we got stuff to do. We can't wait on you. You know what I mean? You getting a ride to come take you to class. But we all just bonded together, like we in this together. So, we walked through that injury with him. It was fortunate. So by that time, I was no longer traveling on no away games. So we were able to kind of just walk him through that. And then you transition to the next year, we moved to a dorm it was just us 4 in the whole floor, like kind of a mod. So we just kind of grew closer, and then we became off-campus roommates. And then upon graduation, we both moved to Atlanta together. So now we're in Atlanta, struggling, keeping our head above water, like good times, just trying to figure it out. His mom is sending $40 on the weekend just to kind of get him through. And then I'm like, all right, my mom sent me 42, but I'm gonna hold on to mine until next week because your mom not gonna send it till next week. And we were working, but trying to figure it out, just kind of figuring out life together. And then in that, we kind of forged an even deeper bond because we were going through the same struggles. In fact, and we're different. He's the logical thinker, responsible, and I'm just let's do it. I'm living in the moment. He was we called him our house mom. It was 5 of us. It was me, him, Will, Shay, and Justin. But he was the guy. He put all the bills, what were required for the money. When the scholarship checks came up, don't forget, on this date, you got $3 that are due for the electric bill. You got $6 due for the water bill. All the bills were in his name. Like he was a finance guy. So all the bills were in his name. He kept track of everything, So he and I kind of are different, but we have the same foundation and the same, basic principles.
So, you guys have really it's almost like a unwritten plan, if you will, because your sons are right there at that same age, they're best friends. You're initiating them into a new program in Corvian, and then you add Chris Emile, another Youngstown born, bred, and raised guy, and another one of your great lifelong friends. What is that process like, having been together so long since the Cool Oak Steelers days? You're both bringing your boys along and setting that example and clearing that pathway as good fathers. When you talk about what your formative years were like without that male figure in the home pointing out the pitfalls and the things to stay away from, and really walking in step with you, helping you figure out your journey. How does that experience impact your fatherhood? And then having 2 good solid guys with you to bounce things off of, and to almost take some of the heat off when the things get thick. How is that coaching your own sons and helping them maneuver through this process with your guys?
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people joke and they say, when you say a plan, it's deep because me and my son, we're the same sign. Him and his son are the same sign. Both our birthdays are in December. Both their birthdays are in June. So like our birth dates are similar to our boys. Like when you say day one, AJ literally held him in the day he was born. Like he literally was in there, and I've seen a picture on the side. They're literally laying together. AJ's 6 years old, and Christian is literally just born. So they're like literally day one. So it was kind of like, it's hard to not be best friends, but they're similar to us. So they're different, but they have a bond. One of the reasons, another one of the reasons, both Christians really became like family to me, like not having this family structure, super, hugging, kissing, nurturing family, not having a father in a role. Both of those situations I've seen, that's kind of where I really seen what a father in the home looks like for men. Mr. Emile and Mr. and Mrs. Emile being phenomenal parents, Mr. Emile being the man in the home, and they both took me in as their own, as Chris and I grew up. So when we get to OU, and kind of another thing that brought us closer as we started to, progress in the football thing, and our parents were coming down more. Rest in peace, James Evans, but his dad was an integral part in his day-to-day life and his upbringing, his growth. So they would come and they kind of took me in as family once, I kind of got to Athens. And that's kind of something I've always kind of clinged to, other families, especially other fathers and other, other situations. So it was, we get to Cool Oak and we're able to coach kind of a core of kids. There's another kid, a guy who's a close friend, kind of the only, the other friend I've made since I moved here, like true friend, brother, like Lamont Johnson. So his son is our boy, same age. And there's another, friend of ours, Doug. His son is our boy, same age. And there's a couple other kids. So we had the opportunity to coach them from the time they were 5 and 6 years old. And Chris and I both were kind of yin and yang, kind of the same way we moved through the college phase. I'm the yeller, screamer, aggressive, physical, fast, live in the moment, let's get it done. And he's the detail, the finance guy. So he's always been the AD of the organization. And we've always coached the same team. So he would be the head coach and I would be the everything else coach. But he's always, getting the ducks in a row, managing the paperwork, getting the parents engaged for that first week or two. And then he come in and we kind of get the coaching. So, just kind of being able to play off each other year over year, and him being a trenches guy and me feel like I'm an everything else guy. Everything behind the line on both sides of the ball, I feel like I can teach. Maybe not coach it the best, but I can teach it. I understand the fundamentals. So our boys are really able to get, to really grasp the fundamentals of the game. So as they continue to grow and matriculate through Little League football, they had a lot of success. And oftentimes they were the small kids or they were smaller than others, or we had to play up because the kid had a weight issue here or there. But they were so fundamental and fundamentally sound and technically sound, they were able to have success. So we were able to get a 14 team because of so we coming out of COVID, no football that 1 year. And it's a long story of how the Corvian thing came about, but nevertheless, it came about. And, we kind of talked to Chris, like, hey, man, you should come down and coach the boys. And he was ready to kind of transition. I mean, he had done more than enough, for that for the community. And, he wanted an opportunity to just kind of, live for himself and get weather. And he said he wanted to coach his nephews. We were blessed that he really stood by that. So once we heard he was going to coach, he was going to commit and come down. We go to a school. We were able to get all the kids in the school, that whole core, that 5, 6, 7 guys. We were able to get them all in the school, even though they didn't have football that year. So, you got parents and kids who were willing to forego, unlike myself with Cheney, who were willing to forego a year of freshman football, knowing that Chris was going to come down and take over the reins for football-wise. So we had a 14U team, and in the midst of that, putting that 14U team together, we're at the school for like AAU practice, and then the season's about to start. So we bump into a couple kids. Oh man, it's in the 9th grade, he's 6'3". Why don't you come play? So we probably had about 10 kids total on that 14U team that ended up playing football for the school this year because we plucked a couple kids off of, that we've seen around in the halls in the school and had them come out and, play with us. So, I mean, the transition was awesome. We're fortunate to be able to get some, because I feel like I'm a pretty decent coach. I'm probably more of a teacher. So I'm learning every day. I'm fortunate to learn every day from Chris Emile, as is, Chris Evans. He's a really good trench guy, but he gets an opportunity to kind of learn it on a broader scale, and kind of implement some of the things that we're good at, and then to take our core, and then they actually help us coach as well. I mean, because they know a lot of times what we're going to say before we say it, so they can kind of, relay some of our messages, because, we talk over, we have I think you had a conversation with Chris, and, we had kids who didn't know what hash marks were. We had kids who didn't know the difference between kickoff and punt. And some of those kids were starters for us the first Friday. These are conversations we're having during pregame on Thursday.
Yeah.
So, it helps to be able to have a core that you've taught and led since 4, 5, 6 years old, to kind of relay some of the messages, kind of behind the scenes or when we're not there doing the coaching ourselves.
So, what can you talk a little bit about what you do in your professional life?
Oh, I work for Hopsteiner. So Hopsteiner is a global leader in the hop business. Hops are one of the main ingredients that goes into beer, craft beer, or any beer, Anheuser-Busch, your Miller, your Coors, Heineken, Corona. There are also there's several craft brewers in the Columbus area, as well as there's some new ones popping up in the Youngstown area as well. But I sell hops to craft breweries. I'm a regional sales manager for the Mid Atlantic or Southeast, depending on how you lay out the states. But I basically have Maryland, D.C., Virginia, North and South Carolina, and West Virginia. So I travel. I'm kind of on the road as much as I need to be. Still trying to help where I can with the football team. But that's kind of what it is. It's intriguing. I'm learning every day because prior to me taking the role, I just thought they poured beer in the keg and got it going. But it's heavy science, heavy chemistry. It's a really in-depth, detailed, smart man's business. So I've been learning. I started in 2019. I've been learning for going on 4 years now. Every day is kind of a learning lesson.
And then, what elements of your athletic career do you use and apply to your work life?
Just detail and focus. I mean, one of the things I kind of prided myself on, especially when I got to college, was knowing what everybody did on the defense. Knowing my position, but also knowing what everybody else did. So, as I continue to learn this business, I know what my product brings to the overall production process of beer, but I also, try to get engaged in what grain and barley and some of the other things do, just so I can know, they're not necessarily my competitors, but I can know what my counterparts, in producing a beer, what their products bring to the table, to know how we can work together to kind of establish more of a team approach when attacking some of these customers.
Man, just getting to spend about an hour, 45, 2 hours with you, reflect back. Because it's weird, right? When you start to reach the ages that we are, and then we can have a conversation with each other and look at each other, but have that memory. Like I could still picture this guy when he was 6, 7 years old. And then, we're sitting here pushing 50, raised, you hiding yours, and mine's is out on full display.
I can't grow. This is probably I haven't shaved my head or my face in a week. Like I can't grow no hair.
Man, between all the rough and tumble that we played, the battles in Bonnie Rogers,
Gwen and Rita's house. Remember Gwen and Rita's
whippings
house?
that I got that you walked out the door and went on home, and I took yours too. We talk about 40 plus years of relationship, actual pride, admiration, and genuine love for the type of guy that you are, because you've stayed rock solid, throughout the whole time that I've known you. I would never put you in that category of individuals that I'm saying, hey, you got to watch this guy, or, be
Right.
careful around this guy. I know what you're about. In saying that, if you think back over your time on that gridiron, if you had that one more down, what would that experience be for you? Where would you want it to be at, and who would be the guys that you would put in that?
Man, it's probably two, to be honest. I mean, it's probably three. Damn. So as I mentioned, I would have loved to win a state championship in Youngstown with Mooney. That damn 1992 game in Niles against Middle Lake Catholic, man, it haunts me to this day. Like, oh man, it's just it seemed weird when we pulled up. We were running a bit behind. Literally, it started snowing on second down. Like first down, we got about, I think first down we got 8 yards. Literally, when we got out the huddle, the field was covered with snow. Second down, we got a yard. Third down, we were stalemated. Fourth down, all we needed to do was sneak. You know, the rain, it's colder, the snow is just coming down, and we fumbled a snap. And it just got away from us. You know, it was, you know, that was probably one of the moments, one of the games where, you know, Butchie was phenomenal at what he did. I mean, I believe, you know, look, I'm playing tight end. I thought I was an elite wide out type guy. I'm playing tight end and never complaining, you know. But that game, the weather was bad, but I think we could have opened it up because they couldn't match us athlete for athlete. They had one exceptional athlete in Joe Jaravicius. He was a bit injured, and then they had a pretty good running back. But outside of that, they weren't fast, they weren't athletic, and I think we could have did a little. That was an opportunity maybe to spread it out because when we got down by 17, we threw the ball around. I mean, I ended up having 120 something yards receiving, you know, but you know this is looking back as an adult, like understanding football a little bit more in depth. Because at the time, I'm like, if we don't fumble, we win, or you know, we planned for this elite passing game. And they run the ball up and down the field. But we had injuries, though, coming into that back half of the season. We were playing with a third string safety. You know, Dwayne was bumped and bruised. You know, so we had injuries in that going into that game. But that game, the play there, I wish it could have been different. And then coming into, you know, probably my senior year. We're playing Northern Illinois. I got a tackle secured on the sideline. One of our linebackers, being a bit overzealous, he comes and he runs and he dives late and he hits me in the knee with a high ankle sprain. So I can't play the next game against Miami. And I wasn't 100% against Marshall. Now, do we win against Marshall? Nah, but I think I impact the game a little bit more. I mean, I played probably, you know, 85% of the snaps, but I was probably 65, 75%. And I was seeing things. My mind was saying, oh, you got him. And I was like, damn. I just didn't have it. I didn't have the explosiveness, you know, the high ankle sprain. And I had taken the medication, so I wasn't feeling any pain. But when I went to plant, it was just kind of like I didn't even have a foot there. So, you know, if I can get that play back against Northern Illinois where I'm not injured, you know, things might have been a little bit different for us. And we beat a Randy Moss team that went on to win the MAC championship.
Oh man, it's been a pleasure, you know, picking your brain, reliving this time. Wish you continued success. You know, I'm always be following and checking in what's going on with the boys. You know, I've known you forever. You embraced me when I came down there to do my stint. Got to see the type of husband and the father and the leader that you are. And I just hope that you continue to do that and enjoy the fruits and all that comes back from being a good, solid person, man.
Appreciate it. Same to you. Once again, man, I'm proud of everything you're doing. This is a phenomenal platform. I can't wait to see kind of what the future has in store for you and it.